Hello and welcome to the viewers of this video. This is the Orange Fan here, bringing you another entry for the episode Recap and Thoughts category. This video will be dedicated to episode 69 of Codename Kids Next Door, Operation White House. We begin this episode with number one waking up to the sound of an alarm clock, but we the viewers quickly see that number one is now an adult with hair, although number one doesn't come to this realization until he looks in the mirror in the nearby bathroom. Number one's startled screams alert the attention of several security guards. Some of these security guards are adult versions of number 86, number 274, and at least one other teen ninja. One of the security guards inquires if President Uno is okay, and sure enough, we see that they are inside of the White House. Number one is surprised to hear that he's the President of the United States. But he doesn't get much time to actually process this information because an adult version of number three, who has a demeanor similar to that of her mom's, enters the room and comments about how a press conference is about to start. Number three is called number one's most trusted advisor later on in the episode, and with a snap of her fingers, number three calls in several stylists to give number one a pair of glasses and a suit for the press conference. They also style his hair. Number three urges number one to walk with her, and number three responds that she's making sure that number one doesn't look foolish during the press conference when he inquires about what's going on exactly. Eventually, number one reaches a podium, and there are a great number of reporters in this room. Number one can only get out an before he's bombarded by questions from the reporters. And yes, through the barrage of questions, number one hears that the kids next door are quite hated. And the questions eventually take on a single topic once one reporter questions about how today is supposed to be the signing of something called the Bill of No Rights for Kids. An adult version of number four arrives, and he assures number one that he will take over answering the questions from here on out. The reporters call number four General Beatles. Number four answers the questions by going into greater detail about how the kids next door are hated, and he mentions that there is a plan to combine the powers of the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and Marine animals to defeat the kids next door once and for all. The only thing that needs to happen first is number one needs to sign the Bill of No Rights for Kids. Number one responds that he would never betray the kids next door because he himself is a kids next door operative, and he points out how number four is a kids next door operative too. But number three quickly passes this off to be a joke and comments along the lines about how it makes sense that number one would be elected for the position of president because of his great humor and his great hair. And the reporters are distracted by number one's hair when number three brings attention to it. Number three then tells the reporters that number one won't be answering any more questions now, and she quickly rushes number one off to the next location that they need to go to. While number one and number three are on their way to their next destination, they are joined by someone else. This someone else is none other than an adult version of number two, who has a mustache. And number two politely mentions that he's brought up before that he prefers to be called vice president rather than number two. Eventually, they do arrive in the Oval Office, and number three comments about how number one's son is already in the Oval Office. Number one is surprised to hear he has a son, but number three figures that number one forgot because of a busy schedule that he has. And we do see that number one's son looks like he's delightfulized. Number 3 reveals number one's son's name to be Shirley, which confuses number 1. Number 3 responds that number one's wife wanted a girl. And shortly after that, number one's wife enters the Oval Office. And number one's wife is none other than Lizzie. Once everyone who needs to be in the Oval Office right now is in the Oval Office, number 1 is urged to sit at the desk in the Oval Office, and he's given a pen so that he can sign the Bill of No Rights for Kids. Number 2 also comments about how this odd nightmare will be over if he signs that bill. Number 1 inquires about what they plan to do to the kids next door, but number 2 responds that it's better that number 1 stay in the dark, because that way number 1 won't get in trouble if the methods that they use become public knowledge. Lizzie also urges number 1 to hurry up and sign the bill already, but number 1 says that he needs to use the bathroom, so he quickly makes his way to the bathroom. After a little while, Lizzie knocks on the door and inquires if number 1 is feeling okay right now. Number 4 speculates that maybe number 1 had a big breakfast, but number 3 points out that number 1 didn't have breakfast today, and she urges the security guards to break the door open. And when they do break the door open, they find that the bathroom is empty, but the window is open. So yes, number 1 was able to sneak out of the bathroom through the window. We then see number 1 is running through the streets. He takes off the tie and the suit jacket while he's running through the streets. And he quickly sees number 4 is in a tank, and there are several other tanks roaming the streets searching for number 1. Despite this large search party, number 1 is able to evade them, and he eventually reaches the Sector V treehouse. He comments about how glad he is that the Sector V treehouse still looks the way he remembers it. There's a security system in the mailbox, so number 1 inputs a password on this security system in the mailbox, and this causes one of the branches of the treehouse to lower to the ground, and we see that this branch has a staircase. So number 1 uses this staircase branch in order to enter the treehouse. He then goes through some security systems. Yes, he goes through some other security systems before he eventually reaches the main control room of the treehouse. Number 1 questions out loud where the kids next door are, and he receives an answer when he's ambushed by the new generation of Sector V operatives. Number 1 tries to tell them that he's not here to fight them, he's here for their help, but they refuse to listen to him. Number 1, though, is able to defend himself, and he manages to get the upper hand. But number 1 then comments about how he knows the treehouse very well, but then he accidentally hits a door wall that's shorter than him, so number 1 ends up becoming unconscious. When number 1 regains consciousness, he's surrounded by four operatives, but a 5th operative enters the main control room and inquires about who the invader is. One of the operatives, whose codename or designated number is eventually revealed to be number 5000, responds that the intruder is the dad of the operative who just entered the main control room. Sure enough, we see that Shirley is the 5th Kids Next Door operative, although Shirley doesn't look delightfulized now, suggesting that Shirley was merely pretending to be delightfulized. Shirley's current outfit is an outfit that looks very similar to number 1's usual kid outfit, and Shirley is also wearing sunglasses. Number 1 is surprised to see that Shirley is a Sector V operative, or a Kids Next Door operative, but Shirley responds that he prefers to be called Vigo. Number 1, though, comments that Vigo doesn't really sound much better. Vigo or Shirley, whichever you wish to call him, then insists that number 1 just call him number 1600. And number 1600 and the other new generation of Sector V operatives then inquire number one about what he's doing in their treehouse. Number one quickly explains to them about how he doesn't belong in this reality. He just suddenly woke up in this reality, being the president of the United States, when that wasn't the case the night before. Number one brings up that he was number one of the kids next door before he awakened in this reality. Some of the other Sector V operatives present, or the new generation of Sector V operatives, are surprised to hear number 1600's dad claim to be number one, but number 1600 doesn't believe this. He says that his dad is an adult who hates kids and cares about his hair. Number one responds that he can't possibly be the version of number 1600's dad that number 1600 is speaking of, because that doesn't sound like his personality. And number one also tries to point out some reasons for why he wouldn't why he isn't the same one. Yes, number one brings up about how if he really was against the kids next door, why would he go to their treehouse or one of their tree houses, and how would he know to get through the security system? Number 1600 does seem like he's considering number one's points, but his train of thought is interrupted when number 4 and several other tanks appear just outside of the Sector V treehouse. It also looks like an adult version of number 65.3 is with number 4. Number 4 says that he's going to give them, he's going to count down until they, number 4 says he's going to do a countdown to give them time to let number 1 go, or else they'll attack. But number 4 is shown not to be very good with numbers. Or yes, number 4's counting skills leave a lot to be desired. And number 1 tries to encourage the new generation of Sector V operatives to come up with, to listen to his plan. But number 1600 insists number 1600 refuses to listen to number 1. He believes that number 1, he and several other new generation Sector V operatives believe that number 1 had lured number 4 and the other military members to the treehouse, but number 1 insists that they followed him. Number 1600 refuses to listen, and he does admit that he almost considered the possibility that number 1 might actually be his dad. But while the new generation of Sector V operatives are trying to figure out a plan of their own, number 1 actually does shave his head off using he shaves his hair off. Yes, number 1 shaves his hair off with a razor blade 2x4 technology weapon and insists that he is number 1. But most of the new generation Sector V operatives still refuse to believe him. Number 5000, though, points out that maybe number 1 is telling the truth, but they dismiss his point and insist that this is just a trick. So 2 of the new generation Sector V operatives take number 1 away. They figure that if the president is held captive, then the Bill of No Rights for Kids can't be signed. So, and then number 1600 instructs another new generation Sector V operative to activate the weapons system of the treehouse to fight back against number 4 and the military members that are just outside of the treehouse. However, while number 1 is being taken away by 2 of the new generation Sector V operatives, number 5000 actually ambushes them and knocks them out, and he urges number 1 to follow him. Number 1 is surprised to hear this, but number 5000 assures number 1 that he can take number 1 to number 5. Number 1 is surprised to hear that number 5000 knows about number 5. Number 5000 clarifies that this is because he's number 5's son. Eventually, the next scene takes us to a prison of some kind. Number 1 and number 5000 arrive through an air vent secret passage, number 5000, pardon me, yes. Number 1 and number 5000 arrive through a secret air vent passage, and eventually number 5000 finds the cell that number 5 is in, and number 5 looks like she's seen better days, essentially, and she's furious to see number 1 here, although we do see her act motherly towards number 5000. His name is revealed to be Leopold, I believe. She encourages number 5000 to tuck his shirt in. Number 5000, though, says that this number 1 can't be the same number 1 of their reality because he remembers all of the Kids Next Door related information that number 5 told number 5000 about. Yes, number 5, though, thinks that this is just a trick, but number 1 tries to assure number 5, number 5 goes on a rant about how the number 1 of this reality had trapped her in this prison, which is for the criminally childish, or something along those lines anyway, and she says that she was put into this prison to prevent, because the number 1 of this reality was fearful about number 5 exposing his secret that he was a Kids Next Door operative in the past. Number 1 assures number 5 that he's not the number 1 of this reality, and he urges number 5 to inquire him about Kids Next Door related questions to prove it. And so number 5 does inquire number 1 with a series of questions. These questions are, who was the supreme leader when number 1 was in training, number 100, the location of Sector I, India, and then number 5 inquires about when number 1 passed an exam, but number 1 admits that he didn't actually pass the exam. Number 5 hacked the computer. Number 5 hacked the Kids Next Door computers to change the results of the exam so that number 1 would pass. Number 5 then inquires. Number 5 then inquires number 1 about who had a crush on number 3 besides number 4. But before number 1 has a chance to answer, number 2 and several security guards arrive, wondering where number 1 has been all this time and what happened to number 1's hair. Number 2 then urges number 1 that they need to... number 5 then greets number 2, calling him number 2, but number 2 once again insists that he prefers to be called vice president, but he's much more antagonistic when he says this to number 5. Number 2 then urges number 1 that they need to get going so that the Bill of No Rights for Kids can be signed. But before number 1 leaves, or before number 1 is taken away, before number 2 takes number 1 off to go sign the bill, number 5 tells number 1 that the Washington Monument is the key to returning him to his home reality. Number 2, though, says that it's ridiculous to think that they used to be Kids Next Door operatives, and even if they were, they're adults now, so it doesn't really matter. He actually says things have changed, or he says something along the lines about how things have changed now that they're adults. Number 1 then says he needs to use the bathroom, and number 2 makes a joke about how they'd have to call him John because of the number of times he goes to the bathroom. But when number 1 tries to go out the window, there's a security guard out there who inquires if he needs any air fresheners. Because, yes, number 1 tries to pass off opening the window along the lines of him just getting some fresh air. And he assures the security guard that everything is fine. So he closes the window, and number 1 tries to figure out how he's going to escape this time. But then he hears some commotion going on outside, and then the bathroom door opens up, and number 1600 is revealed to be the one who opened the door. He now believes number 1. He actually calls him by his code name or designated number and urges him that they need to get out of there. Number 1 notices that number 2 is nowhere in sight, but number 4 has arrived with some other military members. But the new generation Sector V operatives are able to use a lemonade, a 2x4 technology device that is a grenade made from a lemon. Yes, they use the lemonade, this lemon grenade, in order to distract number 4 and the military members so that they can escape. While they're on their way to the Washington Monument, number 1 inquires number 1600 about why he now believes him and why he wants to help him. Number 1600 admits that he realized that number 1, number 1600 admits that he realized that this number 1 is not the number 1 of this reality, because number 1600 says that the dad he knows would never shave his hair off and under any circumstances. And he does admit it would have been cool if his dad is like the number 1 that he's come to know today. And number 1 does respond that he would be proud to call number 1600 his son. They do eventually reach the Washington Monument, and when they go inside, they notice they notice inside number 1600 thinks that it's some kind of space vehicle, but we see that number 2 is already inside of the Washington Monument, and he clarifies that it's actually some dimension traveling vehicle, or he says something along those lines. Number 2 then gets the new generation Sector V operatives to surrender their weapons, but he clarifies for number 1 that he's willing to let number 1 go. He has figured out that the number 1 that he's been talking to today is not the number 1 of this reality, and he's willing to get the number 1 of this reality back. But before that, number 2 says he will only let this number 1 return to his home reality if he signs the Bill of No Rights for Kids. Number 1 responds that he can't doom the kids of this reality. Number 2 responds, what does it matter to number 1? This will just be the equivalent of a bad nightmare once he... number 2 responds, what does it matter to number 1? Because this will be the equivalent of waking up from a nightmare when he returns to his home reality. But number 1 still refuses to sign the bill. So number 2 attacks number 1 and knocks him out of the Washington Monument. Number 3 and number 4 also arrive. They urge him to sign the bill or threaten to attack him. We also see that number 1 is surrounded. The Army, the Navy, the Air Force, and whales and squids are surrounding number 1. Oh, and Skunky Scouts are also surrounding number 1. They say if number 1 doesn't sign the bill, they will attack him and force him to sign it. The new generation of Sector V operatives, the new generation of Sector V operatives actually encourage number 1 to sign the bill and return home. They say that they'll be okay, knowing that number 1 has returned to his home reality. But despite this, number 1 still insists he won't betray the kids next door. It doesn't matter if he's an adult. It doesn't matter if this reality isn't his home reality. He's not going to betray the kids next door under any circumstances. So yes, number 4 orders all of the individuals surrounding number 1 to attack, and number 1 stands triumphantly, accepting what's going to happen to him. But number 1 is unharmed after the dust settles. Number 1 then says he gets it, and then he suddenly transforms into a form that resembles the Hulk. Oh, and some of his hair grew back in the form of a mohawk. Number 1 is able to fight back against this large group of enemies, but eventually they begin to overpower him. And then suddenly, number 1 wakes up. He's a kid again, and he's trying to figure out what's going on. One of the doctors, a Kids Next Door operative doctor, reveals to number 1 that he's in the moon base hospital right now, and says that that number one was knocked out by a potty bomb from the Toilinator. So the rest of the Sector V operatives brought number one to the moon base hospital. And the doctor says that number one had been out for about 10 minutes. Number one, though, insists that it had to have been longer than that, and he starts to talk about the dream that he just experienced. And he's also convinced that this was some kind of test. The Kids Next Door operative doctor just responds that number one would need great hair in order to be the president. And he he then leads number one out of the room in order to get some ice cream and cake. He says they're going to go get some ice cream and cake for number one. But number one still insists that there was more to this dream than meets the eye. And then we then see that there are two shadowy figures watching the room from a window higher up. One of the shadowy figures praises number one for a job well done through this sequence. The other shadowy figure insists that number one isn't ready yet, but does say that they should proceed with more tests or start a test of some kind. But this other shadowy figure makes a point to tell the other shadowy figure not to use Chester's happy headband anymore, revealing the cause of this particular dream. The second shadowy figure says that they don't want number one to catch on just yet. Next up, we head to the end credits scene, and the scene is shown through number one's perspective. We're looking at the scene the way number one would be looking at it, and number one is looking at his teammates, and it's a monochromatic appearance. Number one is telling his teammates about the dream he had throughout this episode in a style similar to The Wizard of Oz, and then the number one's teammates though are just staring at number one, and then number one sees that he looks like Dorothy from The Wizard of Oz, and number one then wakes up. Yes, this was also a dream. And number one says that he has to stop watching old movies. And that is how we end this episode. So there you go. This was the second full episode of Season 6 of Codename Kids Next Door. And this particular episode is very important because this episode kickstarts the main storyline for Season 6. Yes, it has to do with those shadowy figures that are testing number one for some reason. Now, yes, I will say this much. It will be made clear who these shadowy figures are by the end of the series and what these tests are about. But I'm not going to give that away right here, right now, for the sake of those who might just be following along with these recap and thoughts videos, or for one reason or another didn't reach the end of the series or didn't get to see the end of the series and managed to avoid spoilers. So we'll cross those bridges when we eventually get to them. But yes, the main focus of this episode was number one experiencing a dream where a dream where he was the president of the United States. He's married to Lizzie, and he has a son with Lizzie, number 1600. Real name Shirley, but he insists on being called Vigo. And yes, we do get to see some adult versions of several other operatives. Some other Kids Next Door operatives. Number 2 is the vice president. Number 3 is number 1's most trusted advisor. Number 4 is a general. Number 5 is a prisoner. And number 86 and number 274 are security guards. And number 65.3 looks like he's part of the military, like number 4 is. Oh, and I believe number VO5 was one of the stylists. Yes, I believe an adult version of number VO5 was one of the stylists, which would make sense considering number VO5 being a haircut expert or a hairstylist. Yes, number VO5 is a hairstylist for the Kids Next Door organization, so it would make sense for his adult counterpart to be one of the stylists. Oh, and Egbert is one of the stylists too. So, yes, we did get to see several characters in adult form, kids and teens alike. We got to see them be adults in this dream sequence. And I will admit, I kind of wish, or yes, I wish we got to see number 362's counterpart in this reality or this dream sequence. I wish we got to see number 362's counterpart. I also would have liked to have seen number 83 and number 84, Sonia and Lee. Although, yeah, actually, now that I think about it, they don't clarify how much older the Sector V operatives are in this reality. So I don't know if Sonia and Lee would still be, well, they might be teenagers at least, or they might be adults, maybe younger adults. Yeah, it would have been nice to see them. Yeah, I wish number 362, number 83, and number 84 appeared in this episode, but it was still pretty cool that they did show us some of the other characters, Kids Next Door operatives and teen ninjas alike in adult form in this other reality or this dream sequence. And let's see, what else can we talk about? In the episode itself, we did get to see a new generation of Sector V operatives, number 1600 and number 5000. Being the ones that actually had their code names or designated numbers mentioned in the episode itself. The son of number 1 and Lizzie, number 1600, and the son of number 5000. They never clarified who his father is. And if certain sources are to be believed, the other code names or designated numbers for the new generation of Sector V operatives would be number 2400, number 4200, and number 6700. That's if the sources I've been checking are to be believed anyway. Now, there was a detail that did surprise me, that confused me. Yes, there was something I noticed. When number 1 was talking to number 5, and he commented about how he was a kid before this happened, he said he was 10 years old, but Operation Jules from season 3 kind of hinted that number 1 would have his 11th birthday. Now, true, they didn't explicitly say which birthday number 1 was celebrating, but some other sources from certain comments from Tom Warburton indicated that number 3 was the youngest of the Sector V operatives, and that she was 9 years old during season 1 and the early parts of season 2 before her birthday happened in Operation Fast Food. So, and number 1's birthday didn't appear until season 3 after number 3's birthday. Yes, number 1's birthday happened in season 3, while number 3's birthday happened in season 2. And number 3 is said to be the youngest of the Sector V operatives. So that would mean number 1 would have been 11, going by that logic, or going by the evidence that was provided there. Although it's also possible that maybe number 1 just didn't get his own age right because he was still panicking because of the situation that he's in right now. And I can't say I blame him. It's sort of like, I guess it would be similar to how someone might forget their relative's name in a heat of the moment when they're stressed out sort of situation. Maybe that was the same thing with number 1. Maybe he just forgot he was 11 while he was stressed out, understandably so. So otherwise, what else can we say about this episode? This episode definitely stood out for a lot of fans for being, a lot of fans I do remember definitely said that this episode stood out to them back when it first aired. And some people who, I've talked to, or I've seen some people who've said they hadn't seen the show in a very long time, but they said that they still remember Operation Whitehouse in particular. They said that one stood out because of how unusual it is. And actually, with the revelation that this was a dream sequence, this actually does make sense because, let's be honest, dreams can be very weird sometimes. I'm sure most others would agree that they've had their experiences with very weird dreams. And number 1's comment about feeling like he was out for longer than the 10 minutes that he was told also seems to kind of highlight another detail about dreams. The way how it feels like time in dreams moves slower compared to time in real life. I can definitely attest to that. I definitely remember cases where I remember having these dreams where it feels like they've happened for a long time, but then when I wake up and I'm like, really? Only that much time has really passed? So yeah, that was another detail I thought that was pretty cool, how they recognized how time feels slower in a dream compared to real life. And yeah, dreams can definitely be very weird, like what happened with number one. It started off kind of like maybe a surreal sort of weirdness, but it did eventually end with a very, very weird situation with Mohawk Hulk number one and whales, squids, and skunky scouts joining the Army, the Air Force, and the Navy to fight against him. Yeah, it got pretty weird, but it makes sense in a dream. Or yes, it makes sense in its own irrational way. I know that sounds paradoxical, but dreams can be weird. And speaking of dreams, yes, this episode also brought up a detail I mentioned before, how Chester's happy headband would come back to play a bigger role. Even though Chester himself doesn't really play a big role in season 6, he had a few cameos here or there. Or yes, Chester had a cameo in Operation Awards, and I think he might have some more cameo appearances. I'll have to refresh my memory, but yes, Chester doesn't have a significant role in season 6, but he did end up having a small role, big impact sort of role in this episode because his happy headband was used to put number one in that dream sequence, or that alternate reality dream sequence. And so this would be the second time that number one ended up in a dream through Chester's happy headband. And that's right, this episode also provides another hint. Yes, I did mention in the first full episode, or in the recap and thoughts for the first full episode of season 6, which was also the season 6 premiere, Operation Safety, I did mention how certain details in Operation Safety seem to hint that Sector V, and Sector W for that matter, might actually be located in Washington, D.C. And this episode also seems to hint that, with the way how number one was able to walk to the Sector V number one was able to walk to the Sector V treehouse from the White House. Yes, number one was able to get from the White House to the Sector V treehouse within walking distance. And yeah, so that seems to be another hint about Sector V and Sector W possibly being in Washington, D.C. It's also possible that maybe they're located within any of the states bordering Washington, D.C. That's also a possibility, but yes. So yeah, this episode and Operation Safety in particular do hint at the location of Sector V and Sector W. So I thought that was a pretty good detail. It's a small detail, but it's still appreciated all the same. It helps to give us a better idea about Sector V and Sector W. It helps to kind of answer a few questions, even if it's subtly and it's still not necessarily an explicit answer. So otherwise, the next, that's right. I might as well bring it up now, but the next full episode of season 6 is not going to be a continuation to this storyline that started here, but the one after that. So yes, there's 3 more full episodes in season 6. Yes, there's 3 more full episodes in season 6. The next one doesn't relate to the storyline, but the following 2 do relate to this storyline that started in this episode. And as you can imagine, by the end, or throughout the course of the episode, number one is the spotlight character for this particular storyline. And it was also interesting to note how number one was the only Sector V operative that officially appeared in this episode, since the other versions of, because the other Sector V operatives only appeared in dream sequence in this episode. And I might as well bring it up now, but yes, the second episode that's dedicated to this storyline that also only features number one among the Sector V operatives. The rest of the Sector V operatives don't actually feature in the storyline until the last full episode dedicated to this storyline. And yes, the series finale also is dedicated to this storyline. So yes, I thought this was a pretty cool mystery. Oh, and while I'm thinking about it, there also is another hint about the dream nature of this episode. Yes, number one being the president of the United States wouldn't normally be possible because there's a law in the United States that the United States president can only be a citizen who was born in the United States. And Operation England revealed that number one is actually native to England, not the United States. So that was also, yes, I think that was also meant to be a subtle clue that this was a dream sequence, or yeah, that this was a dream sequence. But I thought that was a pretty clever detail all the same. So otherwise, there we go. There was definitely a bit to talk about for this particular episode because, like I said, this kickstarts an important storyline throughout Season 6. Season 6's main storyline, which also concludes in the series finale. So it's definitely going to be an important storyline. And the mystery surrounding those shadowy figures and why they're testing number one will continue in some other episodes in the in Season 6. And it will be made clear by the end, by the series finale, although it still might be considered on the weird side, to say the least. I won't say anything else besides that. But yeah, there we go. So yes, I thought this episode was a pretty cool dream sequence, alternate reality sort of episode. I did like the subtle clues about how this had to have been a dream sequence or that something wasn't right or quite right. I did think it was cool how we did get to see adult versions of some of the kid or teen characters. It's just a shame that number 362, number 83, and number 84 didn't get to appear, if you wanted my 2 cents on the matter. And otherwise, the new generation of Sector V operatives that were present in the alternate reality dream sequence were also pretty cool characters too. Yeah, we don't get to see them again afterwards, but it was pretty interesting to have an idea of what the kids next door might be like when the current generation of Sector V operatives become older. But again, it's not entirely set in stone because of this alternate reality dream sequence nature of this episode. And otherwise, yes, we also do begin an interesting mystery, and we'll be sure to talk about that more in future relevant recap and thoughts videos. So there you go for now. Yes, we've now discussed this episode now. It took some time, but it's done now. So as of this video, we've now discussed episode 69 of Codename Kids Next Door on this channel. Take care, and until next time.